Ever feel like you're just staring at a blank wall? Like you got nothing? You know what I'm saying? That could be horrible. Or it could be a good thing. So let's think about organizational capacity. If you've got a blank slate, then you've got opportunity to build and create from whatever the need may be. On the other hand, if you're looking at it as if you got nothing, then you really need to increase your capacity and get busy figuring out what you're doing. So, how do we take that? How do we capture that and think about moving our organization in the strategic planning process forward? So, Coach, today it's Friday and getting ready for the weekend and some football, of course. So let's jump into this organizational capacity piece. It runs in the background in most of the work that I do, but it's absolutely critical. And I was almost not going to even present this lecture, but then it dawned on me, I do a lot of this stuff without thinking about it, and it's based on my 30 years of being out working and doing this kind of stuff. But it dawned on me, I really need to give you guys the background so that you could have that as you're working through this as well. So let's jump in. We've talked about in the strategic analysis session, or section 5 core content areas. We've talked about the environmental scan, theory of change, your program portfolio, what that looks like, and kind of the business model. Again, a behind the scenes thing, because most of the time when organizations talk with you, they don't have time to go into a full-on business plan, and they're probably doing that anyway. So today, let's jump in and think organizational capacity. So this is kind of that broad range, the background support that's absolutely necessary in running an organization, the infrastructure. As I mentioned, it can be overlooked. It can be like the blank wall. You don't even notice that it's there. But in strategic planning, these systems that function outside of the program work, so think about this, not the systems that provide the program work. So it's that support, it's that context, are all those things you really need to think about. Critical piece that you have to make sure you address infrastructure and that capacity, the background, when there's either an outstanding strength or something that's deficient. And let's talk about this. We'll break some of those down. An outstanding strength could be something where there's an opportunity to leverage something, technological expertise with your organization's business, whatever that may be. It could allow for differentiating your value proposition to customers, different ways of serving clients and that kind of thing, communicating with your constituents. The deficiency could be a liability or require some significant funding. So definitely something you've got to have in mind. So about half a dozen different, or a dozen, I don't know how many that is, areas. So let's run through these really quickly and just kind of talk about each one, because each is slightly nuanced and unique. And again, it runs in the background, but sometimes it needs to come to the forefront. And we need to take that blank wall and write on it. Human resources. Is there any part of your human resource that's so strong or such a problem that it needs to be included in the strategic plan? Something to think about. The goal, you're probably trying to attract and retain qualified staff, volunteers to do the services that you're doing. So some of the questions that you need to ask when you're thinking about human resources are your people a strength and a reflection of the sound recruitment? So are you bringing the right people in? I'm on a recruiting team right now. We're hiring. Actually, I've been on a couple here in the last 6 months. Potentially, if people stay, we're talking about 10, 20, 30 years. I've been in Ohio State for 23 years. I don't know if the folks that hired me are happy about that or not, but it's something to think about, particularly if you're on that team. Is the supervision and performance management carried out well? How are these functions working? How about the compensation policy? We've been working on that. Is it competitive? We've been working on that in extension in our organization to bring our starting salaries up, to get them competitive, because we know we just can't hire people if we don't do that. These things can help or they can derail your strategic planning. Organizational culture, your structure, what's the background stuff that's upholding and guiding, that should be upheld and guided by your shared values? Those bottom line kind of core things. Here the goal is thinking about sustaining a structure and a culture. So what's the informal definition of organizational culture? The way we do things around here. But it needs to have clear lines, accountability. Accountability and commitment go together. Our dean in our college talks about those two as a synergistic relationship, that the commitment to the organization reflects the accountability, and they work together to make the whole and to make things happen, and to be deliberate in our work and impactful in our work. Here's an example of shared values, which is that, again, that underlying premise. We spent, we talked to 21 different groups, about 500 people during the 2019-2020 strategic planning process for the college, and distilled down a set of values that are foundational for our college. Some things are kind of generic: diversity and inclusion, integrity, accountability, leadership, vision. Those are kind of generic value words. They're critical, they're important, but they're not necessarily unique to our college. But we also have foundational values around our land grant DNA, the principles that we adhere to as a land grant college within Ohio State. It was Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical before it was Ohio State University. That's from the land grant itself. So the translational research, the permeable borders, students as co-creators, lifespan learning, and then having that future perspective, those are unique to our college. Some would overlap with other colleges at Ohio State or other organizations, but those are foundational values that we particularly adhere to. So think about your organization as you're doing strategic planning. This is critical stuff. So structure, some questions to ask about the culture. How are your internal communication, decision making? In the Leadership 8420 class that I teach, we talk about decision making, leadership, communications, really critical stuff. How's the existing structure? What does it look like? Your program management structure, the reporting structure. Do you have a high performance culture? Again, how do you get things done? How do you do things around here? Again, they either help or derail your strategic planning. Financial management, kind of background stuff a lot of times, but on the other hand, it's critical to the success of any organization. A lot of times I'll see the financial management piece emerge as a key theme or a goal in a strategic plan for an organization, for a nonprofit, for a department on campus. Audits are necessary. Accurate financial reports are absolutely critical, things that you've got to have in the background. Some questions you can ask around this: does our bookkeeping and accounting happen smoothly? We're redoing some of that here at Ohio State. As you know, we're changing our systems, trying to make things better. Sometimes we think, what a pain in the butt. Other times we have to stop and realize that, wait a minute, we have to be accountable. These are public dollars. We are in the public trust. So the financial piece is huge. A lot of the nonprofits that you may be working with right now or for have a similar bent. It could be donor funded money, a youth center or something like that. And so these are absolutely critical pieces. Not always forefront in a, quote, strategic plan session, but they're underlying, they're foundational, and they need to be considered in the background. Resource and business development. We talked about the business development model 2 weeks ago, something like that. So thinking about the goal here for that stable, broad-based, financial and non-financial resources that support our programs, the work that we're trying to do, the mission. Does that get incorporated? How does it manifest itself in the strategic plan? Key questions around resources and business development. Our foundational activities, think grant writing, think about soliciting gifts, relationship cultivation, things like that. Are they effective? Are they taking place in a managed way? Are the events being managed? NACDEP, so our National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals. It's 16 years old right now, I think, and really neat, similar to the NAEFCS, NA4HA, and the Ag Association, those national associations. We recently formed a development committee because we realized some of these business development models, gifts, opportunity to create more scholarships for our people, to bring students along, was a critical piece. And so that's a new group that's formed. We haven't had that before. So this would be an example of business development. Communication, internal and external, but the external piece, internal in the strategic planning piece is more explicit. External communication can be, but it doesn't always rise. So a couple of things to think about, including resource generation. How do we influence that larger environment, whatever our mission is? Think of kind of the major goal here on the communication piece is the visibility, community awareness. People always talk about extension being the best kept secret. That just kills me. We need to do something about that. So how do we engage? Social media, participating in our work, getting that word out there. Key questions. Are we clear about the goals for our communication, online, social media, website, newsletters, things like that? Do we have a communications plan? You've probably taken a class in this if you're in the ACEL master's or PhD program. Are our efforts meeting the goals? We need to evaluate that. And then what's the role for print communications or graphic materials? Certainly we do branding and there's a reason for that, because we want this Ohio State logo to show up properly. You've probably seen fake branded things where the block O isn't quite a block or something. That reflects really poorly. Imagine if Coca-Cola just let people make their own script Coca-Cola. It wouldn't have the meaning that script has. So that's highly protected, and things that we need to think about, even with our smaller organizations, a youth center or something like that, depending on what you're working on. Here's an example of external communications, again with NACDEP, our Community Development National Association. We have these three committees: communications, marketing, and member services. And you see some color. I don't want to explain it all in the detail, but bottom line, what we found was we had role confusion in our external communication. We had the member services, which ostensibly was supposed to be focused on internal serving the current members, not recruiting new members. But they had some language that said that they would reach out to recruit new members. And the marketing committee is like, oh, I thought we were supposed to do that. But then we're also supposed to be making brochures for the communications committee. Well, what are they doing then if we're communicating or if we're marketing? So we had to come together at one of those meetings of saying, hey, this isn't that hard, but it's a critical piece. And so what we did was we redefined roles, we moved things around, and we clearly articulated what those groups could do for the betterment of our NACDEP board and for reaching new members. We're getting close. This organization is, I'm a member of it, I'm on the board. That's the reason I give the example of hitting record membership. We're over 360 members right now. Well, that is a record right now. We'd like to get to 400. We think that'd be pretty cool. We've never done that before. So if we can clarify our roles, get our communications right, we can absolutely have more impact, reach more people, share the message of what we're working on through this community development thing, this program area, in extension nationally, and hopefully make an impact on communities where we live and work. IT, it's much more broad than it used to be. It is, it's like pervasive. It's in every aspect of the work that we do. So it's absolutely critical to have efficiency and effectiveness in that. So it has to be addressed in a strategic plan. You have to have that not just in the background, but really in the foreground. Some questions you need to ask. Do we understand the needs for this? As we're thinking about IoT, Internet of Things, we're thinking about constant communications, talking about developing our programs and how we deliver those, internal, external communications, tools, not just having tools, but a training on the tools. People know how to use them. I mean, this is so deep, I can't overemphasize it enough. You could probably think of really poor examples in IT, but don't dwell there, because there are some really good ones too. And sometimes we tend to get frustrated because something doesn't quite work right, and then we go down that path. So you got to mitigate that and redirect people. Facilities and equipment. So here's an example. Worcester, the greenhouses. It's kind of a cool shot lit up in the early evening. How are those? What's the cost, performance, and how are we managing those? Can we share that greenhouse space to be more effective, to use it more effectively? How can we increase that? Because you're, especially in the wintertime, you're thinking about heat and what are we trying to grow? How are we trying to do trials in there to help our customers? Can we partner with other OSU campuses or even other colleges to think about doing joint research projects? Effective use of facilities is huge because they're costly. Once again, youth centers and daycare centers, I mean, facilities and equipment are often a main expense. People are too, but that facilities piece you don't want to forget. A couple of key questions. Do we understand our needs? How these facilities are used for serving clients, for performing or programming or learning, whatever it may be, storage even. Do we have the right facilities in place? Do we have the right functionality? And do people know how to use them as well? Planning and evaluation. So this is kind of implicit or germane to the whole ball of wax, what we're talking about doing with program evaluation. Or part of the strategic plan is to help us see and recognize areas where we can do more program evaluation. A goal, ensure that our planning and evaluation systems are serving the purposes that they're needed to do. That is the only way we'll get better. If we just keep moving forward without really pausing to evaluate it, then how do we know we're moving in the right direction? Critical piece. Key questions, do we have a comprehensive understanding? How can we increase efficiency, effectiveness, transparency perhaps even, of our planning, of our evaluation? Bringing in our customers, broadening our team, advisory committees and things like that. Because that's going to help us. That diversity increases our impact because we improve exponentially when we open up the doors and have that diversity, have that outside input. Do our staff and board members require any skills or training that we need to do? Some activities for examining organizational capacity. Think about and decide what level of independence and depth is needed. So kind of basic stuff. What's the performance requirements? What are they? Do we need outside assessment? I was just reading still what the rest of it said. Do we assess the strengths and weaknesses against performance standards? So just another way of kind of thinking about that evaluation piece. Have we determined priorities for investment or additional attention where we really need to focus? That prioritization piece is absolutely huge. Of course, strategic planning absolutely does that. How do you carry out assessment? Think about what information you need. Are the requirements known? And if the organization can conduct it themselves, sometimes you need that outside perspective, particularly if it's complex. You can sometimes do a self-assessment, or a department can do the self-assessment. This old-fashioned SWOT analysis, I just had a discussion with someone on this, that you get a collective eye roll when you say SWOT. And the fact is, that's because people have done SWOT analysis. They've sat there and they've given their input and then nothing's ever been done with it. But if you use your SWOT analysis well and take the next step to distill what you've gained from the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and put them into key themes, you can easily see action items and goals and action items, objectives, tactics from that analysis. I can do it really quickly with remarkable accuracy to give an organization, well, anybody can, it's not just me, to give an organization to move from that blank, nothing, to actions, to really good vetted lists of things that need to be done. So kind of summary on organizational capacity. Broad range of supporting systems, those underlying things, foundational things, the infrastructure that keep the organizational running, can be often overlooked in strategic planning. Because again, some of these systems function outside of our program work, the programming that we do instead of providing the program work. And so we've got to have the context, the infrastructure, the background, that organizational capacity underlying and supporting what we do. So it has to be addressed. If you don't, then you may be missing a real good strength, or that deficiency could impact and derail what you're trying to do, that organizational mission. So that's kind of bottom line. Additional reading, So if you download the slide deck, I'm not going to go through this because it's just, I've got about 12 slides after this that kind of detail this article. But it's a pretty good article overviewing with an overview of extension in organizational identification, OI, with personnel, and looking at how that change can negatively or positively impact things. And it was in the context of restructuring around extension. So pretty good stuff. Take a look. And that's it for this week. See you next time. Hopefully with something written on our wall.